We've then also looked at how to make places look different and to create an environment that is appropriate for that.
This is That Marketing Podcast.
Made by marketers, for marketers.
Welcome to another episode of That Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Spotlight UK. In this episode, we're joined by Mark Meadowcroft, owner of Signs Express Northampton. Signage and vehicle branding is clearly a part of marketing, but one that's neglected by most marketing training courses. So we wanted to explore the nuts and bolts, including literally, of putting up signs for your business. I hope you enjoy listening and happy marketing. Well, Mark, first of all, thank you very much for being on the podcast today as part of our season looking into different industries and how they approach marketing.
Thank you very much and delighted to be here.
I suppose signage is one of those things that, it's a really obvious part of marketing and getting the brand out there, both sort of visually, but it's not something that's on any particular marketing course. So I want to understand, first of all, before we talk into how marketing from your perspective has changed, sort of what was the existing process? Where do you even start when you've got a business, right? I need an office sign or I need a vehicle sign to tell people where I am.
Yeah, I'm always reminded of a story about our auditor, and I went there to sign off the annual accounts, and I was speaking to the audit partner we worked with, and I pointed out that the sign outside the door that all their customers and prospects go past and see was rusted and just ancient and didn't look very good. And he said, you know what, you're right, and I've walked past it for years and I've never noticed it, and it looks awful. And it's the sort of thing that for a few £100 you get sorted out. And he rightly said the difficulty is with our business and with so many others, we would spend thousands and thousands of pounds on a webinar on this, that and the other, which was pretty speculative, and then there's real pushback to spending 700 quid making our brand look right for the people who are about to come in and buy. And that's something that we all see because it's always natural, and it's because unless you look at it with a fresh pair of eyes, you don't see it, because that's human nature.
Sure. So you're going with it's something that comes with the brand. If a brand doesn't have a sign at all, you think, well, they're not established yet, but then you never kind of see them. Like there's either brands that have suddenly popped up or they've always been there. There's not I suppose when you're a pundit, you don't see the process that goes into it. You only see the end result. It's not something that people would think about developing.
That moves us on to the next stage of this, which is how on earth do you buy this? I think part of the reason is that this is something that has never been on a marketing training course ever. How do we buy this? People just don't. Why should they? And so, very often we hear from people who admit that they've got no idea how to buy this. Why should they? And I think there are some useful thoughts that I would have for just basic ideas. Number one, you're going to go to a few sign companies and find out. You're going to test the market. Of course you are. What happens is the sign companies blind you with signs, and that you come back with a load of quotations and you immediately think, well, what does this actually mean? And just the most basic thing, if you come back with a load of prices and somebody is 3 times the price of somebody else, it is almost certainly that you are comparing with apples with something that isn't apples. And you've then got to think, well, what sort of apple am I getting? And there are things that you can do immediately, and I can always say to the sign company that are very, very basic. You can obviously look at their website, you can talk to them, get them to explain it, and that might sort of work. But the best thing of all I would say is, can you tell me something like what we're going to get that is up at the moment? And they should be able to give you 3 things, and particularly for an exterior sign, you should be able to drive over there, have a look at it, and decide whether you like it or not. And that is such a basic thing to do, and I would really recommend it. Go and say, give me an example of something that is on my way home or round the corner or something like that that we can see. And then, of course, because it's there, it's public, there's no difficulty. And you can, even if you're really interested, knock on that door of that company and say, what were these guys like? Did they fit it safely? Has it fallen down 3 times already? How many years has it been up? You can look at the quality of the print. How many years has it been there? It's just a basic thing. I really would recommend that.
Fair enough. The other thing you might get, I suppose, if there's a huge difference in price is, obviously what you're getting can be very, very different. Is new product development a thing within signage, or are all signs pretty much of a muchness?
Yeah, there is a massive thing of stuff coming out all the time, but very often things look quite retro, and there's a big thing that's been going on for a long time to make things look old-fashioned, to make things look distressed. And of course, I'm sure that we all know well enough, we're all professionals listening to this, that they're not really distressed, and there are very clever ways of making them look like that. And so that sort of thing happens. But as in all of these things, you've got to think, what do you want to achieve? And this is on signage and also on vehicle graphics, which is another key prop to our business. Sometimes if you've just got an industrial unit, you need something that people are going to see when they're coming in, and it is smart and clear, and it may be quite high up in the air because you've got delivery drivers in lorries coming there, so something needs to be quite high up, or else they won't see it because they're quite high up. Sometimes you then might be in a retail environment, you need something else. In retail, of course, very often less is more, but I don't really need to tell you that. That's a really basic thing that I'm sure if you're listening to this, you get. And then we get the thing about, does this signage need to be lit or not? And again, a staggeringly obvious point, it rather depends if you're a nighttime business. Do you need a lit sign if you're open Monday to Friday 9 to 5? Yes, you might get an advantage in December or January for an hour at the end of the day, but that might be it. And equally, if you've got a nightclub, then you're going to need a lit sign. But then you've got to think afterwards, where is the electricity that's going to go into this sign? Do we have a spur? Very often we're working with an electrician to make this happen. And all of those sorts of things are things that you need to be thinking about. What is the right thing for our business? Because we can do anything, and there's no right or wrong in these things. It's what's appropriate for the business. And finally, I would say, and the other thing, that the real lockdown learning we've had as a supplier of these sorts of things is that Microsoft Teams is your friend on this, because as the marketing expert, you've then got the issue of what does the sign look like, and you've got various stakeholders in the business who, of course, all have an opinion.
Yeah.
And you can either go around an enormous email chain saying, do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Do you like this? Quite frankly, after a while, everybody's losing the will to live. Or we simply book a Microsoft Teams meeting, we share your screen, we make the artwork changes, and if your CEO, your marketing director, or whatever wants to have an opinion, you simply say you can join the Microsoft Teams meeting. If not, then you've had your opportunity. And I really would recommend that, and I think it's a great way of taking a lot of the aggro out of deciding what this thing's going to look like.
Yeah, I think sort of this is your comment period, and starts here, closes here, done. Yeah, that's not confined to design. I think that is a good learning for everyone in any marketing team, which is hopefully who's listening to this at the moment. And I'm happy you got to pull it onto lockdown learning, because one of the things I was thinking about sort of prepping for this interview was the role of physical offices is obviously still companies coming down hard on we were going back to the office. There's companies coming down hard on remote working forevermore. How does that kind of play into it? Obviously, we're talking more about desk job businesses than manufacturing units that can't move. But how does that kind of changing the environment impact what people are wanting from signage, or think they want, or think they need?
I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, at a very traditional level, the drivers of demand for our sector are when people move or change their business premises, or when they change their fleet of vehicles. Because if you move offices, you're likely to need a new sign, or move your factory or your industrial units, or whatever it is. You've bought, 200,000 square foot of warehousing space right by the motorway. You're going to need a big sign facing over the motorway with your brand. And that's the sort of moment that you come to a business like Science Express. And indeed, after this podcast, I'm out to do a site survey, which is exactly that. The second point is how are these places going to be reconfigured so you may stay in the same place? And I think that's really interesting, because it seems pretty obvious to me that we're going to move to some form of hybrid. I think the extremes of you never go into the office, or we're going to be going back in 5 days a week, are relatively unlikely to occur. It's going to be a mixture of the two. And offices are going to be places where we meet, where we brainstorm, where we do the things that we need to be together to do, rather than the things that we don't need to be together to do. And actually, we might do more if we're in a quiet environment, getting on with it at our own pace. And therefore, we are seeing examples, for example, of places being converted much more into meeting rooms. And one of the things that we are seeing, for example, is we put across a whole wall now, because signage is ultimately sticking stickers on surfaces. That's what it is. A whole wall, we put what we call a dry wipe laminate, which means that you can put a non-permanent marker pen on it. And so you basically have brainstorming sessions across a wall, and so everybody comes in for a meeting and writes on the walls.
I've been in a few.
That's a very old technology applied to something a bit more modern. We've then also looked at how to make places look different, and to create an environment that is appropriate for that, because I think there are going to be relatively fewer people in rows of desks hunched over monitors and keyboards. That's probably going to, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen at all, but it's going to happen less. And therefore, we are seeing things that allow businesses to do that. And of course, carry on doing what we've been doing beforehand, of making sure that not only is there corporate branding, but also the messages that we need to give internally to our people as to who we are, what our values are, why we're doing something.
So I think we've pretty much established that there's still going to be a big need for signs, and that they're going to be different as we go forward. So as businesses are starting to sort of reconfigure their offices, and then, as you said, that's probably a stage where new sign come into being, and hopefully people listening to this will start going out and investigating the process a bit more. Have you got particular hints, tips, hacks, if you like, that are gonna make that process easier for someone who's been charged with getting hold of signage for the office for the first time?
Obviously, at a completely self-serving level, I'd say speak to Science Express.
Fair enough.
It is the classic sort of thing that you've got to actually speak to a couple of suppliers and talk to them and find whoever you're comfortable with. And certainly, I would say, as part of the buying process, you've got to have an initial conversation about, this is what we have, this is what we might want to achieve, what are the best ways of doing this? And from a marketing point of view, and I'm speaking here to marketing specialists, I'd have thought you guys would be much more interested in a business that could understand the objectives that you have in this procurement process, rather than just saying, well, it's 4 foot by 2 foot and it'll be 100 quid. That's not really helping you to get the outcome that you need, because there are numerous ways that we can achieve the same thing. It's like buying a car. I mean, you can have a Hyundai, you can have a Lamborghini. Both will get you to the shops. One will get you around the Nürburgring rather faster. If you just need to go to the shops, you probably don't need to spend the extra money on the Lamborghini. But there might be an opportunity when you might do, or if you've decided you've just got 2 kids and you need to have baby seats in the back, then possibly the Lamborghini isn't appropriate as well. You don't need the high end, you need something else. And all of those things are things that we can cover and help you with. And I would say a good, proactive sign supplier could do, but you've got to have that discussion with them and possibly be open to saying what works and what doesn't, because believe me, there are occasions, having done this for a while now and having come from a different sector previously, what I have seen is I've seen a lot of people come with great ideas and they're often quite similar, and I sort of know why they don't work. And sometimes I have to say, and it is one of the formulations that I use to customers, is if you were a family member of mine and I was advising you, this is what I would say. And I think very often I have to say, be it from us or somebody else, that advice, if they're able to give it and it's credible, is often well worth taking, to be honest.
Sure, I mean, that sounds like a fairly good bit of advice for whatever you're buying. Make sure you've got a supplier that understands you. I mean, going the other way, are there straightforward bits of jargon that everyone should know, so so they don't feel sort of blinded by the science, the engineering side of things? Because marketers probably are more. As a marketer, I'm gonna feel happy saying that we're probably more creative than technical in the vast majority of cases. So are there bits of sort of technical jargon that we should know that we can kind of watch out for as either red or green flags when you're kind of assessing a supplier?
There are so many of them, to be honest with you, but I'm going to give you 2 or 3. I'm going to go on to vehicle graphics slightly in a moment as well, which is a related field. In terms of signage, the first thing that you've got to ask is, what is the substrate? What is the thing this is made of? And there are various things, and they're all good, and they've all got reasons why they're useful in a particular environment. But equally, you may not want to spend a lot of money on a really, really rinky-dink sign that says way out in a factory. And there are relatively more cost-effective things. So you've got to ask what the substrate is and get them to explain that to you. Equally, if you've got a really flash office and you put up a sign that is the sort of thing you'd expect to see in a factory, yeah, it's the cheapest quote. It's not what you were looking for. I think that the other thing as well with stuff, that anything that really goes in the ground, that is, where there's digging, A, that's more expensive, and B, slightly the bane of my life, and the thing that marketing people are relatively less likely to be aware of, is wind loadings and structural engineering. You think, oh, I'd love to have some massive great thing up here, but number one, you may not get planning permission for it, which is a separate issue. But secondly, you've got to think about the wind loading, which is, does it make a massive sail and fall over when it blows a gale? And this is important because the reputable sign maker's first concern is this safe? And they will be looking at the wind loading potentially, which means, what do you have to do to put stuff in the ground to make it stay there? So if you want something really large, yes, you can have it, but be prepared to spend a lot of money on stuff below the ground that you don't see. But yeah, you can do it, but you really, really mustn't cut corners on that. And ultimately, the sign maker is almost certainly going to be telling you the truth there, because they don't really want to do it themselves. It's a right pain for them, because what is below the ground is something that they're not really going to be able to boast about, or it doesn't really show their value. So if they're saying that, they're not pulling your leg. They really aren't. And then on vehicles, the key thing there is that there are two types of vinyl you stick on a vehicle. And the first one is if it's a flat surface, which is fairly straightforward and relatively costs less. And the adhesive is fairly straightforward. Then if it goes over a curve, and obviously vehicles tend to be curved because they're aerodynamic, it starts going over a curve, you need a more expensive vinyl, often from a brand that you may have heard of in the past. And you also need a specialist fitter to do that. And again, that's something that we would do. But as soon as you get into if I said vehicle wrapping, where they cover the whole of the vehicle across all the curves and all the rest, and we do that, and we've done that for some really high profile clients, and it looked amazing. But if you do that, it is expensive. The materials, if the job's being done properly, are not cheap, and the wrappers are skilled guys, and they're usually guys. There are a few girls who do it, but principally it's guys, I have to say. And they're paying good money, and that is reflected in the price.
I suppose it's any sign that they do is, or any wrapping that they do is an advert for them as well, indirectly. So it's not in their interest to do it badly, and that's probably true of signs that fall. Like you'd notice a sign that had visibly fallen over, or a vehicle that's got a wrap peeling off it, than you would probably one where everything's fine. So I can see the logic of them. If they're advising you to spend more money, then it is a reflection of them doing the job well as well.
Absolutely, and make sure they take the time to do it. And taking time is crucial. And the other thing I would also say here is that there is a degree of science involved in all of this, because you are sticking an adhesive onto the side of a vehicle, which is a bit of metal. And again, this is a little bit of GCSE chemistry. That thing's got to stick on, and it'll stick on better at a particular temperature. So, for example, one of the things that we do with our vehicle wraps, we're recording this in July, it's a little less of an issue, but still we tend to keep them in overnight for the first night to let them adhere. If it's in the winter, then we are militant about it. Basically, you will not get that vehicle back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It will stay in overnight. We will then QC it the next morning. But it's had that first night. Because bear in mind, a commercial vehicle, how often do they go looked after undercover in their lives? Never. So we've got to give it that help. And of course, the gold standard on that one is we try and finish jobs on Friday afternoons, leave them in over the weekend, and the customer can have them on a Monday.
Would you run a vehicle post wrapping, or does that temperature impact not have as big a change? Does that not affect it as much? Because obviously, if you're wrapping from the bonnet of a vehicle, then the temperature change, especially in winter from the engine, if you're driving a long delivery shift, is probably going to change significantly. Does that play into it at all, or is that not an issue?
You should be okay on the bonnet, but clearly we get asked to do the radiator grill from time to time, and we say no for exactly that reason. But yes, you're right. There is a temperature issue here, but equally, again, there is scientific development in these wrapping films, and there are some big name manufacturers who make them, and it is fair to say that if you bought a specialist wrapping film from Avery Dennison or 3M, which are companies that you guys might have heard of, does that give you a degree of confidence? Then yes, it does. You should certainly be asking anybody what material they're using, and they should tell you. I would say that from our point of view, that we do use both of those brands. We also use Arlon, and we also use a company called Hexis, and we use a company called Oracal. And those are the big manufacturers of cast wrapping vinyls. Now there are one or two others as well, but I think I've captured the big five there.
It seems like every industry's got a big five or a big four somewhere in there. So it's good to have those have those names
But
out of the
again,
reference point you can throw into the conversation. Sound like you know what
if
you're talking
you're
about.
doing a vehicle fleet, then and this is something that's thrown at people, isn't it? Oh, I've got 10 Citroen Berlingo's.
Mm.
And I suppose that if you were doing that, the first question you'd ask is what you want to achieve, again, from your marketing objective. Because if you just want to brand the vehicles so they are seen and so that there is a safety and security element of this, because very often for businesses that have vehicles that go out and deliver to houses, you want to show who your drivers are legit, if you see what I mean. And that can be done really quite simply and quite cheaply. If, however, you want to be noticed and you want to see this as a way of driving inquiries to your website, then you're going to need to go down a much bolder route, and that's going to cost you considerably more money. And so when you come to that, you've got to think about the capabilities of the people involved, which is what have they done before, basically. That's what it comes down to. Who are you using? What materials are you using? What environment are they working in? Again, the Microsoft Teams thing for sorting out the artwork is incredibly useful, and we did just a couple of months ago a fleet of 10 vehicles for a quite a big grocery brand, and that was a classic example of the use of that. And then at that point as well, I think you're legitimate in asking just to get a sample to make sure that your brand colors are hit bang on the printer or the solid color vinyl that they use. And that's not an unreasonable thing to do. And again, in the past, we have tended to get the customer to come in and have a look at it. Nowadays, we more frequently send stuff out in the post to them so they can see it. The only thing you must do with color matches, and again, I see it doesn't happen all the time, is that you must always, when matching a color, and if I'm telling you to suck eggs, I do apologize here, you must go outside. Because if it's just in your office, then almost certainly the light is all over the place, and you won't get an accurate comparison. So go outside and have a look at it.
Yeah. Do you have a strong opinion on the amount of information that you put on? Because where I live, you get some that have just got the brand, which makes a lot of sense. Then sometimes you've got, this is our Twitter handle, this is our Instagram, this is find us on Google, this is our phone number, this is our mobile number. I think if a van's driving past me, I'm not going to have time to write any of that down. But is that missing the point? Is it making it available? I suppose you've got the parked up time as well. How do you get that balance right between overloading people with information and just...
Amen to that. Yes, you're absolutely right. And this is the biggest thing that we have, because we still have a substantial part of our business that are builders and carpenters and electricians and plumbers who've got their new van and they come in and they want it doing. And this is where what you say is absolutely correct. And most of these plumbers and so on, that they want far too much information on their vehicles. And you keep saying, well, you've got a website, you've got a Facebook page. All people need to do is take a picture of it, put it on their phone, and they'll find you on Google. And you can take it from there. And they still want this, that, and the other. I probably think that it's still, in the world we live in, unless you're a very specific brand, a telephone number can be defended on these. I mean, I don't think that I would ever dissuade somebody from doing that. And you may want also to indicate if you cover a particular area or region. And you can do that with a telephone number, of course, by putting a local landline. So if your business covers the Manchester area, the 0161 is actually really useful, because that tells people you're a Manchester business.
So I thought, what about the idea of having a QR code on the side of your vehicles? If someone can just sort of scan it with a phone, and that's got all your contact information. If you update, if you change your number, change your address, that's all still in there. Do you think that's something that's likely to take off, or is that a completely ridiculous idea?
No, it's not ridiculous at all. And I would say 5 years ago, 80 or 90% of the vans that we did had a QR code on them, and still a substantial proportion do now. And I mean, and still people put their Facebook links on there, and frankly, why not? In the end, if they want it, it's not the worst thing to do by any means. But the QR code, yes, and the only thing that has superseded it is just the might of the first page of Google, which I'm sure is a whole suite of podcasts for you separate to that. Is that
Yeah.
I think the general thing that people do is they just take a picture of it on their phone, put it into their camera roll, and they say, "Oh, I need a whatever." There's the van, and we use a camera roll as an aid memoir, don't we?
Yeah, I definitely do that.
Yeah, and so therefore you got it on the camera roll. At that point, the vehicle graphic has done its job. Of course, what then makes it very, very difficult is that you've got to try, as I'm sure you'll want to put a value to that and find out where the initial inquiry came from. And of course, that gets lost because they then make a website inquiry, which is registered within your CRM as a website inquiry, as it is for us, but actually it came from the vehicle. The website has just been the tool that has made the final connection, rather than the actual thing that exposed your prospect to the brand for the first time.
Yeah, I suppose with my marketing automation hat, and that's a beautiful little way to me to put a sales pitch into the podcast, which I try not to shoehorn in. But I suppose if you had a slightly different, or you had a specific page link on your van that isn't advertised in any other marketing, you could still capture that. So you wouldn't necessarily lose it entirely if you had if you had sort of signedexpress.co.uk/contact, but then the main page on your site is /contact us, then you would still be able to capture that. So there is still, you might not lose it.
Yes, we do see that with specific phone numbers and specific web addresses. That's certainly, I'm not saying that doesn't occur, but what I'm trying to say is that this is just part of the general noise that you're making. In truth, most of the customers we do are the ones who are very much sold on the idea of vehicles. Just make the point to me, look, it's actually not a difficult decision to make, because even if I'm spending £2,500 per vehicle, which is right at the top end, okay, that would be a wrap on a Mercedes Sprinter or something like that. That's a big job. And they might say that Sprinter is going to be out 5 days a week for 50 weeks a year. So it's out for 250 days a year, driving around central London or whatever it is. It's a billboard that's out there for 1,000 days. And that means that the cost of that billboard of £2,500 divided by 1,000 is £2.50 a day.
Yeah, that is.
I would simply say, if it wasn't earning its money back on that, that's a problem with our brand and our strategy rather than the delivery system. Of course, it's worth it, and I'm not even going to bother with a rather spurious calculation that really I'm not seeing the wood from the trees if I start doing that sort of
thing. Yeah, fair enough. I think that's a really good, strong point to end on. End on the ROI, end on a number, and on something that's powerful that marketers can take to CFOs and MDs, whoever else they need to sign off on things. And say, look, this is going to pay for itself on this calculation. I do have one question before we wrap up, and it's probably the most important one in the whole podcast. Is it marketer or is it marketeer?
I must admit, I have always gone down the marketeer route. I don't think it's possibly something I have quite a strong opinion, however, as I do have on David Bowie, because it's definitely David Bowie and not David Bowie. That is what I would fall out over.
I agree with you on both of those. I'm going to say, yeah, I'll go that way on marketers and on David as well. Brilliant. I think that's a really good place to wrap it up. It's been a really interesting discussion, a really dive into, as we said at the top, I think an industry and a business and a sort of section of marketing that most people don't think too much about. So thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.
I mean, if I can just say one thing, just say purely on a self-serving fashion, but if you listen to this, my name is Mark Meadowcroft. My business is Signs Express. We're the franchise in Northampton. So if you go to signsexpress.co.uk/Northampton, and there's stuff here that you want to listen to, under no obligation whatsoever, even if you're the other end of the country, go onto the website, hit me up. I'll have a chat with you, and I'll try in all of these sorts of things to find the solution that's right for you guys. And that might be Signs Express, but there are occasions when it probably isn't. And we see lots of examples of moments when actually another company is going to do it better, because there are all sorts of, rather like marketing agencies and stuff like that. There are so many shapes and sizes, but I'd be happy to guide you. And if it's something that I feel where we can add value to your business, obviously we would throw our hat in the ring. But more specifically, it's about getting you the outcome that your business is going to need.
Fabulous. All right. Right. You heard the guy. You heard Mark. Let him get in touch with him and tap into this expertise that we've heard so much about on the podcast. All right. And we'll leave it there. Thanks again, Mark, and bye for now.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Marketing Podcast. You clearly have wonderful taste. We hope you found the content useful and enjoyed it. We'd love you to subscribe wherever it is you're listening to us. Maybe leave us a review. If you can think of a topic that you'd like us to cover, or even if you fancy coming on the podcast and sharing your own experience on a particular topic, you can reach us at marketingteam@spotler.co.uk. Thanks once again, and happy marketing.